They laughed, they mocked him, they called him boy. What they didn't know was that this man had stared death in the face not once, not twice, but 3 times in the burning sands of war. They saw a tired old face. What they didn't see was a hero. The gas station was quiet, save for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional clang of the cooler door. James Ellis, in a faded hoodie and jeans, stepped in just after 8 p.m. He'd been driving across Georgia for hours. The worn Marine Corps decal on the back of his dusty truck was barely visible anymore. He didn't care. He wasn't one for glory. He just wanted a cold drink. As he approached the counter, 2 young men loitering near the snack aisle looked him up and down. James noticed it, the way their eyes narrowed, then shifted toward each other with smirks. "Hey, boy," one of them called, his tone mocking and sharp. "You lost." James paused, not because the insult stung. He'd heard worse in war zones, but because the word brought back memories, not of anger, of fire, of heat and blood, of deserts where names didn't matter, only rank and action. The clerk behind the counter, a teenager with earbuds and attitude, barely looked up. "I said." The man repeated louder, "You need help, boy?" James turned slowly. His brown skin, grizzled beard, and tired eyes gave away little. But inside, the Marine in him was calculating, measuring, choosing. "I'm fine," he said simply, his voice steady but deep with command. But they didn't back down. Instead, one walked closer, laughing. "You look like you came out of a ditch. Ain't no reason for someone like you to be in our neighborhood." The cashier still didn't react. James let out a breath. If they only knew, if they knew about Ramadi, about Fallujah, about the time he carried his wounded lieutenant 3 miles under fire, or the Silver Star sitting in a drawer back home, collecting dust because he didn't need to wear his medals on his chest to prove anything. He looked at the man in front of him, a kid, really no older than some of the recruits he trained. "You ever been shot at?" James asked calmly. The man paused, confused. "What?" I asked. James repeated. "If you've ever had to patch a friend's chest while bullets tore through sandbags over your head, or hold a rifle so long your fingers bled through your gloves." The young man looked uneasy now. "Didn't think so," James said, taking a step forward. "I've been called worse than boy by people who never walked away from it. I earned my respect in 3 tours. I fought so kids like you can talk dumb in gas stations without worrying about rockets landing on your roof." Silence. Then, James pulled a small item from his wallet, a military ID card, worn but intact. He laid it on the counter without looking. The cashier finally removed one earbud and glanced down. His eyes widened. "Sergeant Major Ellis." The boy mumbled. You were in the Marines." James didn't answer. He didn't have to. His name, his record, his battles, they spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. He paid for his drink, walked past the now silent young man, and paused by the door. "You don't gotta respect me," he said, without turning around. "But you'll learn one day. Titles fade, uniforms come off. But character, that sticks." And with that he left, a shadow moving through a world that never quite knew how to handle men like him. Not a boy, a warrior, a survivor, a Marine. As James stepped out into the warm southern night, the cicadas buzzed in the trees, and the weight of years settled back onto his shoulders like an old pack. The glass door of the gas station swung shut behind him with a whisper. He didn't look back. He never needed to. The truck creaked as he climbed in. Its old engine grumbled to life, and James stared out through the dusty windshield for a moment. His reflection in the glass stared back, tired, grizzled, and quiet. But behind those eyes was a fire that never went out. He had once stood at the gates of hell, seen brothers fall in faraway deserts, and felt the tremble of the earth under mortars. He had led men, buried friends, and written last letters home for those who couldn't. But here, in the country he fought for, he was still just boy. It wasn't new. At 17, he'd joined the Corps because he believed in something bigger. Freedom, honor, service. But even then, boot camp hadn't been his toughest fight. It was coming home that had tested him the most. There was the restaurant in Alabama that asked him to use the back door, The job interview in Tennessee where the manager said, "We don't need any trouble here." The department store security guard who followed him up and down every aisle, eyeing him like a criminal. Not that any of them knew who they were looking at. They didn't know about the rescue mission in Helmand, where he dragged 3 wounded men out under RPG fire, or the interpreter he shielded from a grenade with his own body, or the Afghan child he helped get medical care after her village was destroyed. They didn't know how many nights he woke up sweating, fists clenched, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. He had given this country everything, and still, they called him boy. As the truck rumbled down the road, James passed an old church, its windows glowing softly in the dusk. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for an older black man sitting on the steps, strumming a guitar and humming low. James slowed. He pulled over without knowing why. "Evenin'," the man said, tipping his hat. "Evenin'." James nodded. "You look like a man who's seen some things." James gave a half smile. "You could say that." "You served?" "I did." The man strummed a slow, mournful chord. "Same, Vietnam. Came back to fire hoses and names. They called me boy too." James exhaled slowly. "Funny how this country forgets the names of the people who bled for it." The old man looked at him. "It don't forget, it just don't. Wanna remember." They sat in silence for a moment. Then James asked, "You ever feel like it wasn't worth it?" The old man looked up at the stars, then shook his head. "Every fight for dignity is worth it, even when nobody sees it. Especially." Then James nodded. "That hit home. I'm heading to visit my daughter," he said after a pause. "Haven't seen her in a while." The old man smiled. "You go do that. Let her see the man you are, not the label they try to hang on you." James stood up, extended his hand. "Sergeant Major James Ellis." The old man grasped it firmly. "Staff Sergeant Willie Dean Simmons, U.S. Army, 1st Cavalry. 2 warriors, 2 generations." Same story. James drove on. The highway stretched out in front of him like a ribbon into the night. His daughter's house was still hours away, but he didn't mind. He'd seen worse roads, traveled longer ones. The world didn't always understand men like him. The quiet warriors who wore their scars under their skin, who didn't demand thanks, only fairness. But he wasn't waiting for recognition anymore. He was living for peace, for legacy. For truth. And whatever they called him, it didn't matter, because he knew who he was, a son of this soil, a fighter, a Marine. Forever. The road stretched into darkness, lined with towering pines and broken fences, familiar to James in a way only the southern backroads could be. His fingers tapped the steering wheel as an old country blues song hummed low through the crackling radio. Each mile marker he passed felt like a memory, fragments of a life stitched together by discipline, pain, and perseverance. He hadn't always been this quiet in his younger years. Before the corps hardened his voice and dulled his expression, James used to laugh louder. "Love easier, but war changes you. It doesn't always break you, but it reshapes you." He thought of Teresa, his late wife. She was the anchor that held him steady when the waves of PTSD tried to pull him under. She used to say, "You don't have to wear your strength on your sleeve. I see it in your silence." He missed her terribly. Their daughter, Maya, had her mother's fire, strong-willed and brilliant. She was finishing her 2nd year of medical school in Atlanta. And though James never asked for anything, she called every Sunday without fail. It was Maya who urged him to visit, said she missed seeing her hero. He never knew how to respond to that. As he neared the edge of town, he pulled into a diner on the side of the highway. Lorraine's Place, the faded sign read. He hadn't eaten since morning. Inside, the diner was warm and smelled like bacon grease and old coffee. A few truckers sat at the counter. A young white waitress, no older than 20, glanced up and gave him the kind of look he'd grown used to. Surprise first, then hesitation, then calculation. "Sit anywhere," she said, voice guarded. James nodded, choosing a booth near the window. When she approached, pen poised, he smiled politely. "Coffee, black, and the meatloaf special, if you've got it." She scribbled and walked off. "No thank you," no smile. He didn't take it personally. Not anymore. He glanced around the room. On the wall behind the register hung an old, dusty flag. Beneath it was a framed newspaper clipping from decades ago. Local Marine awarded Bronze Star. James squinted. The article was yellowed, but he could just make out the black man in the photo, younger then, strong and proud in his dress blues. He smiled faintly. Esquiti, Louis Rankin, a man he once trained under at Camp Lejeune. When the waitress returned with his coffee, he nodded at the clipping. "That's Sergeant Rankin, isn't it?" She blinked. "You know him. I served under him. Good man. Great Marine." She looked at him, really looked at him this time, as if something shifted. "He was my granddad." James nodded again. "He taught me how to lead, how to stay calm when everything was falling apart." She was quiet a moment, then said, "I didn't know you were a Marine." James took a sip. "I don't always advertise it. I'm sorry about before," she added, more quietly this time. "It's just, around here, people make a lot of assumptions." He chuckled softly. "Story of my life." By the time he finished the meatloaf, which was better than he expected, the atmosphere had changed. The waitress brought him a slice of pie on the house, and one of the truckers tipped his hat as he left. Small things, but they mattered. James climbed back into his truck and sat still for a moment, staring out at the darkness beyond the headlights. He thought about the young men in the gas station, the old vet on the church steps, the waitress with the weight of heritage she barely knew, and he thought of Maya. He pulled out his phone and called her. "Hey, Dad." She answered quickly. "You okay?" "Yeah, baby. Just wanted to say I'm on my way. Should be there in about an hour. You sure? You're not tired?" "I'm fine." Pause, then, "I'm glad you're coming, Dad. I want to introduce you to someone." James raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah, a guy. Name's Marcus. He's a veteran too, Army." James grinned. Despite himself, "I'll try not to judge." Maya laughed. "You're impossible. I love you." "Maya, I love you too, Dad." He hung up, slipped the phone into the console, and pulled back onto the highway. The miles ahead weren't empty anymore. They were filled with purpose, with family, with healing. The world would keep calling him whatever it wanted. Boy, old man, stranger. But Maya called him Dad. Teresa called him love. And the Marines called him brother. He drove into the night, carrying a history written in silence, service and steel. And he wasn't done writing yet. As the road curled toward Atlanta, city lights glimmered on the horizon like distant stars. James felt his chest tighten, not from fear or fatigue, but from the pressure that always came before reconnecting, before being seen not as a soldier or a stereotype, but as a father, a man. He hadn't visited Maya's new place yet. Last time they saw each other, she had come to his small home in rural Alabama, bringing groceries, hugging him a little longer than usual. She always sensed when he was drifting too far inside himself. "Come see my world, Daddy," she had said. "You've lived your whole life in the shadows. It's time you let some light in." And now here he was, trying. He exited the highway into a leafy neighborhood lined with well-kept homes, porch lights glowing like beacons. Maya's apartment complex stood on a quiet corner, modern but modest. A small U.S. flag fluttered from a nearby balcony, the kind of place where neighbors waved at each other, where people jogged with strollers and golden retrievers. James parked, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the soft night air. Maya answered the door almost instantly. Her smile lit up the hallway. "Hey, Daddy," she said, voice warm as a blanket. "You made good time. I wasn't about to keep my daughter waiting." She wrapped her arms around him, squeezing tight, and for a moment, James closed his eyes and let himself feel it, the warmth, the welcome, the peace inside. Her apartment was neat and colorful, filled with books, photos, and the faint scent of lavender. A framed picture of Teresa sat on the mantel, smiling like she'd never left. James touched it gently. "Your mother would be proud of you." "I hope so," Maya said, suddenly shy. "Come on, there's someone I want you to meet." In the kitchen stood a tall, lean young man with deep brown eyes and a posture James recognized immediately. Straight-backed, alert, respectful. The man stepped forward and extended his hand. "Sir, I'm Marcus Taylor. Maya's told me everything about you." James shook it firmly. "That's so?" She didn't exaggerate, Marcus added. 3 tours, Silver Star, and a reputation for holding the line when others ran. James raised an eyebrow at Maya. "You been bragging on me, only the truth," she said with a grin. "Now, sit down. Dinner's ready." As they ate, roast chicken, greens, cornbread just like Teresa used to make, James listened more than he spoke. Marcus talked about his time in Afghanistan, his work now helping veterans transition back to civilian life. Maya chimed in with updates about school, her plans to work in underserved communities, how she wanted to build something that mattered. James felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been locked away since Teresa passed. He was proud, not the kind of pride you speak aloud, but the kind that fills every corner of your soul. After dinner, they sat on the balcony. The city pulsed softly round them. Marcus lit a candle. Maya curled up in a blanket. James sipped sweet tea and looked out over the rooftops. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said after a while. James nodded. "When people treated you like less than what you were, how'd you keep going?" James didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Because I knew who I was. The Corps taught me that. My wife reminded me. My daughter proves it every day." He looked at Maya, then back at Marcus. "You don't serve for the thanks. You serve so that people can live free, dream loud, fail, and try again. You serve because somebody has to carry the load. Sometimes the reward isn't in the medals. It's in moments like this." Marcus nodded solemnly. James leaned back in his chair, eyes closing for a moment. The weight of the road, the fight, the years, it was still there. But it didn't feel as heavy now, not here. Not with family. Maya stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're home, Daddy. You don't have to fight anymore." He looked up at her, eyes glassy but proud. "Maybe not the same way," he said. "But the mission, it never really ends. Now it just looks different." And as the night grew quiet and the candle flickered, James Ellis, the man they once called boy, sat surrounded by love, legacy, and light. No longer invisible. No longer underestimated. He was exactly who he had always been. A protector, a leader, a Marine. And most importantly, a father, whose war-forged heart finally found peace. Without firing a single shot, the morning sun poured through Maya's living room windows, casting golden lines across the hardwood floor. James had been up since dawn, sitting quietly on the balcony with a mug of coffee in hand, the steam rising slowly, like smoke off a battlefield now long past. He wasn't restless. Not this time. He was reflecting. Inside, Maya was preparing breakfast, humming softly to an old Donny Hathaway track as she moved through the kitchen. Marcus had already gone for a run, his sneakers by the door, evidence of the discipline James respected. Everything here was calm, stable, safe. It was a strange feeling. James had spent decades in a world where safety was temporary, peace was tactical, and silence usually meant something bad was about to happen. Now, in this small apartment above the city, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Relief. Maya stepped onto the balcony, holding a plate, sweet potato pancakes. Mama's recipe. James smiled. She used to burn the first one every time. Tradition, Maya said, laughing as she handed him the plate. "I burned mine too." They ate in companionable silence. After a while, Maya turned serious. "You know, Daddy, when I was a kid, I didn't understand why you never came to school events, why you sat in the back during recitals or left early during parent-teacher nights." James set his fork down, nodding slowly. "I thought you didn't care," she continued. "But now I see. You were trying to protect me from what the world saw when they looked at you." James's voice was quiet. "I wanted you to be judged for your mind, not by the shade of my skin or the shadows I carried." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You never needed to protect me from who you were. You're the reason I stand up in rooms that weren't built for me. You're the reason I speak with my shoulders back." James looked down at her hand over his. "I didn't know how to talk about what I'd seen," he said. "The war changes a man, Maya, but coming home changes him more." She squeezed his fingers. "You're home now, and there's a generation that needs to hear your story, Daddy. The kids you served for, the ones who don't even know men like you walked before them." He nodded slowly. Maybe I'll start talking, he said, but not to be heard, to be understood. She grinned. You always had a way with words. You just like to pretend you didn't. They laughed. Later that day, they visited a local community center where Marcus volunteered. It was packed with young vets and struggling teens, some dealing with re-entry after incarceration, others simply looking for a way forward. Marcus introduced James. This man right here is a legend. 3 tours, Sergeant Major, carried more weight than most of us can imagine. James stepped forward. He didn't read from notes, didn't need a podium. He simply spoke. I was called boy in the streets I fought to protect. I was followed. In stores, denied jobs, dismissed before I even spoke. But I didn't give up, because I knew who I was, and I knew I wasn't fighting just for me. They listened, really listened. He told them about Ramadi, about Teresa, about standing in the rain at Arlington, burying brothers who never made it back, and about a daughter who helped him learn to live again. When he finished, the room was silent, not out of shock, but out of reverence. A young man stood, eyes filled with quiet fire. They call me thug in school every day, but I want to join the Marines. James walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. They'll call you names, son, but the only one that matters is the one you answer to. From that moment forward, something shifted. James Ellis became more than a story passed around at VFW halls or whispered about in hometown barbershops. He became a mentor, a guide, a voice. He started visiting schools, speaking at veteran centers. He wrote letters to congressmen and coached young black recruits on what to expect, not just from combat, but from coming home. And every time someone called him boy, it no longer hit the same, because he had reclaimed the word, rewritten it with pride, refused to let their ignorance define his legacy. At Maya's next graduation, her white coat ceremony, James sat proudly in the front row. His suit was clean, his shoes polished, and his silver star gleamed under the lights. When the dean called Maya's name, she walked across the stage, paused, and pointed to her father in the crowd. My hero, she said, her voice cracking, the one who taught me what strength really looks like. And James stood tall, still, unshakable. Because in that moment, surrounded by doctors, dignitaries, and dreamers, he was not boy, he was a man, a Marine, and the father of a woman changing the world. Real heroes don't wear capes. They wear scars, and sometimes they ride in on quiet trucks, carrying stories the world tried to ignore until someone finally listened. Years later, long after Maya had built her clinic in the heart of Atlanta and James had become a respected figure, in local veterans programs, a reporter came by to do a story, not because James sought fame. He never did, but because young people started talking about the quiet old Marine who showed up to every community meeting, every school assembly, every veteran's burial. The man who spoke with his hands folded and his words sharpened by experience. The article ran in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution under the headline, From Boy to Brother, the Marine Who Never Stopped Serving. Photos followed, one of him in uniform, one of him holding Maya's hand at her clinic ribbon cutting, and one candid shot, James sitting on a park bench, talking with a group of young men, each listening like their lives depended on it. And maybe they did, because James Ellis had become more than just a man with medals. He was proof, living, breathing proof, that dignity doesn't come from what the world calls you. It comes from how you carry yourself when no one's watching, from showing up even when they say you don't belong, from fighting battles you never asked for, and still finding a way to lift others. When yours are done, he never needed statues, never wanted a parade. His reward was simpler, a daughter he was proud of, a country still learning, a name that now stood tall, even when once dismissed. As for that word, boy, it lost its sting, because the man they once tried to belittle became the very foundation others stood on. Thank you for watching this powerful true story. Like if it moved you. Subscribe for more inspiring stories of real strength. Share to remind the world, never judge a man by the labels they give him. He was called boy, but he was a hero long before they knew his name.